Okay, right now I want to turn to what is possibly a very bright future and possibly a very dark future. One of the smartest people on the planet today, I think, is also one of the spookiest guys on the planet today, because what he is talking about really is not in his hands, it's in your hands. He is extremely important to listen to. He has been right so many times. His name is Ray Kurzweil. He's a technological visionary. He is an inventor, a theorist. His predictions are incredible. He makes the most interesting man in the world look like a snore fest. He has predicted the explosive growth of the internet, the inevitability of wireless modems when less than 1% of the country was even on the internet. He made a prediction, along with many others, in his 1990 book, The Age of Intelligent Machines, most of which came true in the next decade. In his next book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, he was even more impressive. Of the 147 predictions Kurzweil made for 2009, 78% turned out to be entirely correct. Another 8% were mostly correct. I think that's kind of like he's mostly dead, not entirely dead, if you watch The Princess Bride. He is not just talking about what technology is coming down the pike. This man is creating it. Kurzweil invented the first flatbed scanner. He is the first to come up with print-to-speech reading machines for the blind. The first text-to-speech synthesizer. He made a bet with Stevie Wonder years ago over whether a synthesizer could sound like a real piano. As a result, he created the first music synthesizer capable of recreating a grand piano and other instruments. He won the bet. He also made the first commercially marketed speech recognition software. PBS named him one of the 16 revolutionaries who made America. The logical question to ask Ray Kurzweil is, what do you see coming next? And we'll ask him those questions, but I have some deeper questions than that after you hear what he sees coming. Here's a bit of what he does see coming. Artificial intelligence. The next step is merging your brain with a digital brain. Driverless cars will be the norm. By the 2030s, nanobots will be in your bloodstream. Our brains will communicate wirelessly with the internet. Technological singularity is on the horizon, which basically is the creation of machines that act like and are smarter than humans. In his latest book, probably going to be #1 in the New York Times list, unless they play a little game with the numbers with Ray, his latest book is How to Create a Mind. Think of just the name of that, How to Create a Mind. That's exactly what he's trying to do. Ray explores reverse engineering the brain to understand how it works, and then using that knowledge to create super intelligent machines. How close are we? Tonight, you will glimpse into the future. Joining me now is Ray Kurzweil. Ray, how are you?
Great to see you, Glenn.
Good to see you. We saw each other the first time 6 years ago.
Was it that long?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yesterday.
What's your biological age now? Because you were trying to reverse engineer your age at the time.
Well, people think I look pretty good for 95. Actually, I'm 64, but biological aging tests, I come out maybe high 40s, something like that.
Which is lower than I think last time I saw you. You still take, what do you still?
Probably about the same.
You still take, like, I was in like 3,000.
Well, I take 150 pills a day, which is down from some years ago.
Okay. I want to talk to you because your book is, I mean, this book I read when it came out, this came out in the 90s?
99.
Yeah. This came out, when I read this, I was both thrilled and spooked out of my mind. This one is 10 times this book, because this one, it's here. I mean, you're starting to see the things you talked about here.
Absolutely. And it's actually amazing how people don't take it for granted. If you predicted some of the things that exist now, 10 years ago, which in fact I did.
You did.
People thought it was crazy. Now that they're here, Watson can defeat the best 2 human players at Jeopardy, which is a game involving subtle, ambiguous language and all of human knowledge, and it got a higher score than the best 2 players put together. People are asking questions of their phones with Siri and Google Now. Google driverless cars. I've talked to people who've driven in them, and they quickly gain more confidence in the AI driver than in the human driver, which may not be saying much.
You've never driven with me.
And then people just shrug their shoulders and accept these things. Something like Siri or Google Now, they say, oh, well, it made mistakes. That's typically the reaction to technology. And it comes out, people say, well, it doesn't really work perfectly. A few years later, when it really works well, and people say, well, it's not a big deal because it's not new.
There is a difference between, for instance, Yahoo and Google. I use Yahoo. I try not to use Google, much of it your work. But I try not to use Google. Google is by far, I mean, I can type like 6 different things and I'm not finding it with Yahoo. But Google is...
So why don't you use Google?
Because I'm helping you create artificial intelligence if I use Google. And I am not a technophobe. I like technology. I just don't trust. Let me be real frank with you. This is a hard thing to say to you, and I wondered if I should even say it to you. What is the difference between you and somebody who worked in the eugenics program in the 20s and 30s?
Well, the eugenics was, first of all, a technology that didn't work and was anti-human. It involved killing people, and,
okay,
as opposed to enhancing people.
It didn't at first. It didn't at first. They were trying to, let's create the perfect person. Let's enhance the perfect person. Let's have the most intelligent. I mean, if
there's no such thing as perfection. I'm not actually into perfection, and the mistake in the movie AI is that Hal should be perfect because he was so smart. But actually, as we solve more difficult problems, there's inherently no such thing as perfection.
Right.
And Watson made lots of mistakes. So did the humans. But Watson did a better job. If you play tic-tac-toe, you can do a perfect job. You try to do something meaningful, like run for office or something. It's impossible to be perfect.
Right. Especially if you're running for office, it doesn't seem like you need to get close.
And I think what technology does and does already is make us smarter and more intelligent. I'm smarter than I used to be,
right,
because of these brain extenders. During that one-day SOPA strike, I felt like part of my brain went on strike.
Here's what I'm concerned about. That when we'll get into it later on. You're creating artificial intelligence, and you talk about it in this, that at some point you're going to go to reach and turn off your machine, your computer, and your computer say, don't, I'm lonely. And so it becomes confusing on what life is, what the self is.
We're there now. We can't turn off the computers. I mean,
right.
Our infrastructure would fall apart. Civilization would
Correct.
grind to a halt. We no longer have our hand on the plug. And
right.
Human decisions are a collaboration of human and machine intelligence already.
Right.
And we're much smarter than we used to be. We have access to all human knowledge with a few keystrokes.
But you're taking it now to, and I'm not anti-technology because my life is enhanced by it as well. I hated maps. It is so easy now to get anywhere, to find anything.
That's one small example.
It's fantastic. But you're talking now also about whatever the device looks like in the future, that it will answer a question before I ask it because it's listened to all of my conversations.
That's fine. Yeah. If you let it, but you will.
Yes, you will. But my problem is not the technology, but who has access to all of my thoughts, all of my questions, all of my conversations. Where is that going?
Well, this is an issue right now. I mean, we do very intimate things, like write tens of thousands of emails to a girlfriend
right.
on our personal computers, and we don't have absolute control of that information. Relatively few people actually have their lives ruined by invasions of privacy. There are a couple of people that might disagree with that who were in the news recently. But,
right.
I mean, I talk to people, and privacy actually is alive and well. I mean, it used to be you just had to close the blinds in your bedroom, and now you've got 1,000 virtual windows. But we actually have the means of closing those virtual windows.
The Senate just today introduced a bill where they can read anything that is on your email or anything that is on your server. So that gives the government, without a search warrant or anything else, just access to go in. I mean, Google is already at least scanning all of my email to find keywords to target things. I mean, at some point, does it ever become Minority Report to you?
There's pluses and minuses. You know, did we have more privacy when there was one sort of party line that several families shared? And how did you have a private conversation with that? I mean, we actually have much more means of private conversations now. But privacy is a complicated issue, and I agree with you with concerns about government intrusion. I mean, the technological building blocks of Big Brother are there, but it's also very empowering of the individual. It's, I mean, I wrote in the 1980s that the Soviet Union would be swept away by the then emerging social network, which was email over teletype machines, fax machines, and that's what happened in the 91 coup against Gorbachev. People thought it was nuts when I wrote that in the 80s, but then it broke the back of this model of the authorities keeping control of all information. There was this clandestine network of hackers that kept everybody in the know. And we had a great wave of democratization during the 90s. We see the effect of social networks today. I mean, it doesn't always move in the direction we might want, but
again,
basically, go back 75 years ago, there were only a handful of democracies in the world.
I don't know if I would classify like Egypt and Libya. I'm not on the bandwagon that they're a democracy. Right. They are a democracy, but it's a democracy. Sometimes can be a, what is it that the head of Turkey said is a trolley stop on the destination, on the way to your destination.
Well, there's different gradations, obviously, but we are more democratic. We're actually more peaceful, like Steven Pinker's recent book, Our Better Angels. You had a very good chance of dying violently in the 15th century. Even the bloody 20th century was peaceful compared to earlier centuries.
So when you look at technology, and I want to talk about what's in your book on how to create a mind and what is self, what is consciousness. Mm-hmm. But while we're here for a second, let's just talk about. I have no problem with technology, and we are right now. We're at a place to where we can communicate unlike no man has ever had this opportunity to do. I can see things. Anderson Cooper, that picture, that would have taken weeks. If you ever would have seen it.
That's an example of democratization,
right? But if you,
because information is power, and knowledge of what's happening is power, and.
Two things on that. You're exactly right. Information is power. The government building this huge complex to grab all of that information. I think it was the head of Google at one point. No, it was Google. It was Facebook. I think it was the head of Facebook said in a speech once that people who are children today will have to change their name by the time they're 20 because there will be so much that they have done that's out there that they'll have to divorce themselves from. And you say information is power. What happens when a company gets so big, and if it ever merges with the government or through strongmen, when the technology that's currently out there falls, if there is violence on the street, what stops somebody from taking over these giant data collection bases and then using them at the point of a gun? And then we are truly slaves because you control everything.
These technologies could empower Big Brother. They can also empower the individual. I think there's actually much more examples of the individual than Big Brother so far. But technology is a double-edged sword. Fire kept us warm, cooked our food, but also burned down our villages. And these new technologies have pluses and minuses. There are even more existential risks. Biotechnology is going to save us from cancer and heart disease, but could also empower bioterrorists to be extremely destructive.
Right.
So I'm not saying there are no dangers to technology at all. In fact, I've written extensively about these dangers and what we can do about them. I'm encouraged by the fact that this power is so widely distributed. It's not just in a few government agencies. A kid in Africa with a smartphone has access to more democratic knowledge and search capability than the President of the United States did 15 years ago. A kid with Facebook started, a kid with a notebook computer started Facebook. A couple of kids in a late night dorm room challenge with notebook computers started Google.
Right.
Tremendous power is in everybody's hands. We're seeing young teenagers doing these kinds of things today.
I just wonder, as we started the show today, when you can't see the difference between Israel and Hamas, Israel's not a perfect place. No place is perfect. But there's a difference between Hamas and Israel.
Well, I would agree with you there, and at least there are many channels to get these messages out, as opposed to the old days where there was maybe just three networks and no internet and maybe a few newspapers. There were very few channels to make a statement to show people what's going on in the world.
Okay, let me take a break. When we come back, I want you to explain what is LOR and PRTM.
Okay.
Because this is the basis of what this is all about.
Yeah.
Right? Back in just a second. Okay. You're in for a wild ride. This is all out of a book, How to Create a Mind, and it's a series of books that you should read, but this is the latest one, How to Create a Mind. Ray Kurzweil is an inventor and futurist, and is the guy who's going to be responsible for artificial intelligence.
Well, I'm working on it.
I have to tell you, I both celebrate you and despise you at the same time. I am torn because I just don't know how it's going to end, and I suspect.
Well, as we said, technology is a double-edged sword, but it actually has been very beneficial. I mean, go back and read Thomas Hobbes or even Charles Dickens as to what life was like 200-300 years ago.
Right.
Short, brutish, disaster-prone, disease-filled. Human life expectancy was 37 in 1800, 48 in 1900. There was no social safety nets at all. Before 1930, Social Security was put in.
I know.
We were too poor to do anything. The world is much better off in terms of wealth, health, education. We had 50,000 college students in 1870. We have 12 million today.
Remember, I'm a guy who's starting an internet company, so I know it's a double-edged sword. Okay, so let's start here. What's LOR and PRTM?
Law of accelerating returns basically says that information technology, like computers, like communication devices, biology, genetic sequencing, information about the brain, progresses exponentially, not linearly. That's what it says. People go, well, what's the big deal with that? If I take 30 steps exponentially, 2, 4, 8, 16, I get to 1 billion. 30 steps linearly, I get to 30. Our intuition about the future is linear. And this is actually the primary difference between myself and my critics. So halfway through the Genome Project, 1% had been finished. So people said, oh, 7 years, 1%? It's going to take 700 years, like we said. That's linear thinking. That's our intuition. My reaction was, oh, gee, 1%, we're almost done. 1% is only 7 doublings from 100%.
It's the point of singularity.
And it kept doubling. It was finished 7 years later. All of biology now is understood as basically software. And our ability to update that software and reprogram it is doubling every year. This is several billion times more powerful per constant dollar than the computer I used when I was a student. It's 100,000 times smaller in size. We'll do both of those things again in 25 years. So this again will be several billion times more powerful per dollar and the size of a blood cell. And that gives you some idea of what will be feasible. That's the radical nature of information technology.
Let's get this straight again. Size of a blood cell.
Yeah.
And several billion times more powerful. Is that all the
per dollar? Yeah.
Per dollar. So is that all of the human brains working together? More than that?
25 years from now, yes. I mean, that'll be much more powerful than the human brain. We have computers now that can do things that the human brain can't do, like play Jeopardy better than any human, for example.
You talked about in one of your books that you saw a point to where you would have computers that would have the computing power of all of the human brains, didn't you? Did you see that down the road, 2050?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, so what is PRTM?
That's the pattern recognition theory of mind. That's what this book articulates, basically describes how the neocortex works, and allows us actually, with that insight, to create artificial intelligence based on our understanding of the human brain. And it's not as complicated as you might think. One line of criticism is, the human brain is this vastly complex, it's hundreds of trillions of connections, each one is exactly where it needs to be, and that's just not the case. That's like describing, well, what is a forest? Well, a forest has all these different branches, and each one is exactly where it needs to be. That's not how you understand a forest. You understand a forest that there are trees, and there can be different kinds of trees, and each tree has branches, and they're repeated in a certain pattern, and there's a lot of random variability. And understanding the concept of a forest is a lot easier than understanding even a single tree. Understanding how the neocortex, which is where we do our thinking, is easier than understanding a single neuron. And I describe how it works. And in summary, there's a module that recognizes a pattern. So some of them recognize, a crossbar and a capital A. And then at a higher level, one might go, capital A. That feeds up to a higher level that goes, the word apple. Go up another bunch of levels, and maybe there's a pattern recognizer that's getting input from different senses. It might say, there's a certain fabric, certain perfume, certain voice quality. That's my wife just entered the room. Go up another 20 levels, and there's a pattern recognizer that fires, she's pretty, that was funny, that was ironic. You probably think that those high-level recognizers are a lot more complicated and sophisticated than the simple ones that recognize the edge of an object or a crossbar and a capital A. They're actually the same basic concept. It's just the high-level ones exist at a high level in this hierarchy. These pattern recognizers
are... If I shuffled the deck, they're the same.
Right, although it wouldn't work if you shuffled the deck. The connections, this hierarchy, is critical to its functioning. Now, where does the hierarchy come from? We actually create that ourselves. The neocortex is capable of essentially connecting there's 300 million of them in the human brain, these pattern recognizers in this elaborate hierarchy, and we lay down one conceptual level at a time from the moment we're born, or even earlier than that. So from the very first moment that our brain is working, it is laying down one conceptual level at a time. I have a 1-year-old grandson, and he's got several levels of abstraction under his belt. He's got a few more to go. And we have 300 million of them. One of the reasons that kids can learn, say, languages so easily is they have all this virgin neocortex. It's not used. By the time we're 20, we've used it all up. We actually can't learn anything new without letting go of old memories. I talk about that process in the book, and some people aren't very good at that, which is why they're rigid thinkers. We can learn new things, but we have to kind of reorganize older memories.
How do you reorganize older memories?
By being open-minded. Part of it is to let go of redundancy, because like the pattern recognizer recognizes a crossbar and a capital A. I don't have one of those. I probably have 1,000 of those. I don't need 1,000. I could probably do with 100. So as you actually master a skill, you can let go of some of the redundancy and apply it to new knowledge. That's one strategy. But the neocortex kind of does this automatically, but some are better than others, which is why some people are more open-minded than others, later in life.
Okay, so you're reverse engineering the brain. You're finding this pattern. And we're going to take a break, and then we come back, and you tell us what does it mean in machines next.
Singularity is a future period in which technological change will be so rapid and its impact so profound that every aspect of human life will be irreversibly transformed.
There won't be a clear distinction between humans and machines.
Our computers are not going to be these rectangular devices we put in our pocket. They're going to be inside our bodies and brains, and we're going to be a hybrid of biological and non-biological intelligence. In about 40 years, the pace of change is going to be so astonishingly quick that you won't be able to follow it unless you enhance your own intelligence by merging with the intelligent technology we're creating. So that's such a profound transformation that we've borrowed this metaphor from physics and call that a singularity.
We are back with Ray Kurzweil, the author of How to Create a Mind, and he talks about a future where artificial intelligence machines can catch a fly ball. Anticipate questions before you even ask.
I think that's actually where search engines are headed. They will listen in on your conversations and what you're writing and reading, and will see the information you need, and you'll just get used to information popping up that you need before you even ask. So yesterday you were thinking about some supplement that gets into the cells, and here's the new research that came out 13 minutes ago on that topic. It'll be like a personal assistant that helps you. And I think that's actually the primary purpose of artificial intelligence, to make us smarter. We are smarter already because of this very pervasive AI that helps us. As search engines won't just be based on words. They're going to actually read all this content, the millions of books and billions of web pages, and understand the content that's on the pages. And they'll be listening, and they'll get to know you and the kind of information that you want.
That's really what Google is doing now. The search engine that we use, it's making this map.
It's
right?
remarkable how well it works. It still does not, really fully understand the pages on the web. It has not read everything. That's possible to do. We're going to see search engines move in that direction.
How long?
It's over the next few years. They may not read with human quality, but they have the tremendous scale, what Google calls Google scale, to be able to read everything.
You talk about merging with machines and being able, Google, we were just talking off air about Google Glasses, where it will, give you information as you're looking at somebody. I look at you and it says, hey, it's Ray, the last time you saw each other was 7 years ago, blah, blah, blah. And it's giving me this information. The rich will be able to afford that when it first comes out, and then it will become more and more.
There's a 50% deflation rate to information technology. You can get the same capability year later for half the cost. But we put some of that in better performance, some of that in lower price. So you can buy an iPhone today that's twice as good for half the price as 2 years ago. These technologies are only affordable by the rich at an early point when they don't work.
I got it.
And then later on, when they work well, you've got 30% of
You're preaching to the choir. I'm a capitalist, man. Yeah. I got that. My question is, at what point does it become a right? Because if I'm poor and I can't afford to upload information, I can't afford to have the nanobot
technology. But it's eventually going to be virtually free. We're going to have three-dimensional printers where we can print out three-dimensional objects virtually for free. We're going to have an open source access to all of these information products. So like today, you can get millions of songs, books, movies for free and have a very good time with free information. People still pay for Harry Potter or the latest blockbuster.
Okay.
So the proprietary forms and the open source forms coexist. The economy is the proprietary forms, but...
I got to take a quick network break. Back in a second. You want to see the future, read the book, How to Create a Mind, Ray Kurzweil. So what's the struggle? If all this comes to pass, we can do anything.
The struggle is these technologies can overcome the grand challenges of humanity, but they also create new challenges. And we mentioned earlier that technology is a double-edged sword. I think it's important that society understand the promise and the peril. There's strategies to avoid the peril. They're not pat strategies. We have to put a high priority, for example, in keeping biotechnology safe, while at the same time we apply it to actually overcome human suffering.
Do you remember the book Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan? Did you ever read that? Mm-hmm. You should read it. He talked about a world getting so technologically advanced that the average person no longer understands it, and so it becomes like the priests, the high priests, and everything's in Latin to them.
Actually, nothing is so complicated you can't explain it. That only happens when people aren't very good at explaining things. Because I explain the human brain in this book, and I'm not
Right.
oversimplifying it.
Right.
And it's written for a lay audience. And I think it's important, actually, that people understand where society is headed. We have an opportunity to really overcome some age-old problems of poverty and disease and so on. There are new dangers. You mentioned some
Yes.
with privacy, but there's others.
Yeah.
There's strategies to deal with them. I think we're actually doing fairly well. Society actually is a lot better off than it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's a very continual progress in terms of wealth and health and education
Right.
and even peace.
It's not necessarily technology, it's freedom to be able to think and create and keep that creation. You know, it's
Well, greater abundance gives us greater freedom,
Right.
and you know, we didn't have very democratic institutions with liberty and so on hundreds of years ago because there was too much scarcity
Right.
to afford them. And
Ray, it is, you know, as we get closer to the singularity, it gets more amazing to talk to you because every time I see you every 5 years or so, so many of your predictions have happened. And
well, let's make it less than 5 years this time.
it's good to see you, sir.
Pleasure.
Thank you. The name is Ray Kurzweil, the book, How to Create a Mind, and he's doing it. Back in a minute.